And welcome, Neema Black. I feel like I want to sing this to you because you're a fellow singer. Welcome to Finding Your Voice After 40 podcast. How are you?
Thank you. I'm well. And I don't mind if you sing to me. Go right ahead.
No, I want you to sing to me because
Oh,
you are the guest. No, I'm just playing. I'm not going to put you on the spot. I hate when people do that to me. So, without it being planned, but welcome, welcome. It's so good to have you here. And you and I, it's funny, this podcast, I invite friends, family, and dream people, people I stalk. But you're definitely amongst the family. You're becoming more like family. So, I'm really excited to have you here. Super
well,
excited.
thank you. And I'm extremely grateful to be here. And I am beyond grateful that you and I finally connected. As I told you when we first met, because I
Yeah.
had been observing you from afar, and once I first learned of you through our mutual sister,
Uh-huh.
Rakia, I was like, yeah, this sister, we're going to meet one day.
We're
I
gonna
knew that we
meet.
would cross paths.
And you're right. I was doing the same to you. So I would see your IG and I would see you kind of responding, to Rakia's posts and so forth. So I'm super excited to have you. I want the audience, those who are listening, those who are watching on Patreon, they can see the little scroll bar of your title, but those who are listening may not know who you are. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to read something to you. I just want you to relax, listen. Take it all in. All right. So I'm going to start reading this to you and then I'll ask you some questions. Um, Neema Black, the non judgmental vegan, is a multi passionate native Californian singer songwriter, holistic health and wellness coach, and host of the Harmonious Living podcast. She's also the founder of the 90 Days to Wellness plant based eating program, as well as an avid hiker and yoga enthusiast. In addition, Neema owns a product based business which offers clean vegan nutritional supplements, skincare, body care, makeup, and hair care. Neema's mission is to inspire women and girls to practice radical self love through healthy, aligned, heart centered, divinely inspired thinking, choices, and practices. So tell me this, how did it feel hearing about you, hearing about yourself?
You know what? It felt pretty doggone good. and and I say that to you, and I don't take it lightly because I didn't always feel that way
Mm,
about myself. And
mm,
it's like even though my deepest knowing knew these things about me and knew that I
mm.
had these things within me, but it took time for me to get to this place, and it took me giving myself permission to even own certain parts of myself.
Wow.
So hearing that
Wow.
it's really a remarkable point on my journey,
Mm.
to say the least, to be able to accept that and then not want to deflect it or diffuse it or water it down in any way.
Yes, to stand tall in all of that.
Yeah.
Not just to stand in it, but to stand tall in all of that. Okay, so
Yes.
you just said some really good things, and I'm sure it's making people like, "Oh, what's her story? Why wasn't she embracing that?" So, you because you wear both the artist and the coach hat. You're wearing both hats, and it's funny. Here on the podcast, we do a series, Art Voices Matters, where I'm featuring artists over 40 and kind of how they are living and reinventing their lives over 40, and then just people from all other sectors of life. But you have it all. So I'm like, is she gonna be part of the Art Voices Matter segment, or is she gonna be part of the regular? But so I may kind of, I may bounce in and out of artists, but I definitely want to pick up on what you just said as far as it took you a minute. And so I'm curious to hear a little bit more about Neema in her 20s. We won't go as far back as little girl, only because of time. Because although if little girl pops up, please bring her up. But I start typically exploring people because it's our 20s where we're hitting adulthood and so forth. So, what was that, Neema, about?
Mm. Exploration, adventure, Um, yeah. And I would say the very earliest part of my 20s, because so I moved away from home days before my 21st birthday. I moved to the Bay Area.
Okay.
And I had always been very much like a, good girl, did what I was supposed to do, right? Those
Right.
paradigms that we have about get good grades, go to college, you do that whole pursuing the track of whatever, trying to get a good job and all of that. But I had always been a creative person, and I always knew that there was something. And so I ended up moving to the Bay Area, and I went there under the auspices of transferring schools and continuing my academics. When I got there, I started partying. I started meeting people and just having fun, like what
Yeah.
people who are just over 21 do.
Right. Right.
And I found myself, though, I had some fun times, but
Hmm.
I also found that I was going through some things. And so at about 22, 23, I got to the point where I was at the heaviest I had ever been. And
Mm.
I was working in this health food store, and I ended up meeting this person who ended up later becoming my son's father. And so at
Okay. Okay.
at 26,
Hmm.
I had my son.
Okay.
And you know God bless him. I knew that, how you could see things,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you know that things are not going to last, that is not going to be sustainable, but you keep going anyway. And so
Mm.
that
Hmm.
relationship ended. I was going kind of back and forth between San Diego and the Bay Area, and especially because most of my family is here in Southern California, and I knew
Okay.
that my support was here.
Right.
So I ended up coming back to San Diego with my son, and just really trying to just be a good mom, first of all, and
Hmm.
focusing on just figuring things out. So I didn't
Mm.
really have a clear direction. And, some of that even goes back to the whole idea of, like, when I started in college, initially I chose psychology as a major, but then before I even got there,
Mm.
um, I changed my mind because I was like, I don't know if that's what I want to do. Like, I'm interested in it. I've always been interested in psychology. And
Mhm.
I always found myself in the role of like counseling people, or like being, giving advice and things.
Mhm.
And, but music was there. And I did not know of a way to choose something where I could do music all the time and have it be a practical career, or that I could get a
Music
job.
practical? What is that?
Exactly, and
Yeah.
then I had two different voices from my parents, and
Mm.
my mom supported my music growing up, as far as like being at my performances and all this stuff, and my dad too, who also is a singer.
Mm.
He had his own aspirations, and then life happened. I and my sister happened, and so you know
Right, right.
he ended up needing to support us. And so
Mhm.
um there was this thing. It's like, what do I choose if I can't do what my first choice is?
Mm.
So, and I heard you talk about this before, about, when you're that young, you don't know exactly what you want to do. And,
Right, right.
or if it's something creative, and if you have not had people around you the whole time, giving you the pathway and encouraging you the whole time,
Mhm.
then you may not necessarily go on that track. And so,
Right.
I chose that major, but then I said, okay, I'm going undeclared. Then, then I floated around and said, well, I'll just take my general ed classes till I figure it out.
Mm,
Something
mhm.
will jump out at me. I'll figure it out.
That
And
Sagittarian spirit, they don't
yes,
know that, but I'm like, "Ooh, that Sagittarius was alive." Yes, yes.
very much, very much.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
all of that was at play. And and I didn't want to be in this box. And it's so funny because even that ties to things that I've learned about myself recently, not just about my
Mhm.
astrological makeup, but
Mhm.
even my human design makeup, because I'm a
Yes.
manifesting generator. And
Yes. So you
so
constantly making things
constantly
happen.
doing things, which to people from the outside might look like, oh, dang, you just pick something, or you're doing this and you're doing that, and like people can't keep up. But it's like, for
Uh-huh.
me, I know why I'm choosing to do things. I know what's behind what I feel like I'm going to get out of it. And really, what it all has been is enriching life experiences. And
Yeah.
so, through the latter part of my 20s, I was back in San Diego. And I got to this point, particularly when I was 29, which is often a
Mhm.
pivotal year for
It's
people.
pivotal. Yep. 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 Yep.
And I was having a conversation with a family member, and of course, I had stopped going to school, which had led to this whole big blow up with my dad, because
Mhm.
I told him I was taking a break. He was like, people who take breaks usually don't go back. And I was like, well, that's most people. That's not me. I promise you I'm going back. And so, anyway, long story short, I had a conversation with a family member, and she encouraged me to meet with a counselor at
Mhm.
UCSD, which was where I went when I first started right out of high school. And so
Mhm.
I met with this sister. I'll never forget her. Her name is May Brown. And
Mhm.
we looked at what I had done before. We looked at what I was interested in. And I had taken a lot of Spanish classes growing up, and I had taken some Spanish classes at the university level. And I've
Mhm.
always been interested in language. At one point, I was looking at communications as a major,
Oh, interesting.
and we devised that linguistics, with a
Mm.
concentration in Spanish, would be a good fit for me. We talked about some of the things I could do with it, namely going into speech pathology, which was something that I was very
Ah,
interested in doing because I've always had this desire to help people.
yeah.
And so, yeah, I ended up choosing linguistics with a concentration in Spanish. And I completed my bachelor's degree. And it was
Mm.
interesting because going back, and by this point, I had turned 30. I
Mhm.
had my son and at the university's daycare, which worked out
Right.
perfectly.
Right.
And I found myself being one of the oldest people in the classes. And that was an
Mhm.
interesting thing. but
Yeah.
it but I was more prepared, because at that point I had more of a sense of direction, and then I ended up choosing music as my minor, so I
Okay, so
still
you were able to get it in there. You were
I
able to
still
get
got
it
it
in there.
in,
Yeah.
yes. And
Yeah.
throughout that time, dibbling and dabbling, like with bands, here and
Mhm.
there, and exploring the music still, doing like little recording on other people's stuff or what have you. So the
Mhm.
music was always there. It never leaves you.
It doesn't
And
leave. Yeah.
and so yeah, that was my 20s.
Wow. Thank you so much for that, because it's so funny. The reason I love interviewing people and doing things like this and podcasting and so forth is stories we find ourselves. It's funny, we hear your story, but it causes us to reflect on our own story, because either there's going to be something that really resonates that's like, yup, I went through the same
Mhm.
thing. Or you're going to say something that's like, what? Really? Like, I never knew that, or I never have experienced that or seen that. So I just love storytelling.
Yeah.
Okay, so you did a lot in your 20s. It sounds like there was a lot of exploration.
Mhm.
So let's move ahead just a bit and move toward our 40s. Where, or you tell me, where did this whole holistic, health coach part, because linguistics is over here, music, I totally get the arts, but there is a whole science brain that has to come involved. The psychology interest, I can see how that seeps in. But where,
Mhm.
at what point did that come into play and how?
So it started, it's funny, if I go back to the beginning, my very first exposure and inclination and interest in studying nutrition and the body was when I was in high school. I
Mm,
had this really engaging biology teacher, and he introduced us to all this information about like chemicals in the food supply, and all of these preservatives and things and what it does to the body. And so at that point, I had decided that I wasn't going to eat red meat anymore. So then I was only eating
Ah,
like poultry and seafood. And I did that for a time, and I was interested. I was always active and things like that, had gym memberships and whatnot. So I've always had that inclination to be active.
mhm.
But then time passed, reverted back to it. And so that early point that I told you about when I got to my heaviest,
Yeah.
that had been a result of I had reincorporated red meat, and I had
Mhm.
reincorporated all of this like late night fast food eating and like all these other things. And so
Mhm.
when I was introduced to veganism, and in particular, I didn't just go vegan, I went raw vegan.
You went raw vegan from
I
eating
went,
animal protein completely to raw vegan.
yeah.
Wow.
And
Wow.
yeah, I know. And I say that to myself because, but I was working at a health food store when this came to me. So it's like I was in
I
that
got you.
direction of pursuing going back to healthier things. But then when this was introduced to me, I was like, first of all, how do you do that? Because I couldn't even conceive it in my mind of how do you not cook things, first of all. And then, you know how those questions come up. Wait a minute. So you don't eat no cheese? Nope. So you don't, no chicken, especially Black folk.
Right.
You ain't no
No
chicken?
chicken?
No.
You don't get no fish? No. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
disbelief is the first thing. But then once I started seeing it and tasting it, and it was like, oh my goodness. And once I started feeling it, and the weight just melted off. Like I wasn't doing any extra exercise or anything,
Yeah.
but like within 6 months of going raw vegan, I dropped like about 40 pounds.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow, within
And
that amount of time. Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, your body really wanted that. It craved that.
Yes, it
Yeah.
did. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it responded really well. I mean, my skin cleared up. I felt wonderful. I felt energetic. And I was like, okay, there's something to this. This is,
This plant thing actually may work. And I
yeah.
wanna say this, I don't wanna interrupt you, but those who are just listening, Naama is beautiful, okay? She, like,
Oh,
glows. Her skin, her hair, her eyes, her smile, she's just very glowy. You're very it's so funny, I tell my friends who are like this, "You're dewy," like, just kinda moisty, dewy, like, really, and I know, I will say this, I think, people keep trying to buy you can keep buying products, and we're going to talk about products a little bit in a moment, but it is from the inside. And how you feed your body, how you feed your mind and your soul, though
mm,
those things combined, that's where you're getting dewy.
mm.
That's where you're getting the shine and the glow. So yeah, I just had to say that because I know a lot of people are listening. So you guys have to come to Patreon. Go to patreon.com/finding your voice so you can watch the video. But yeah, yeah. So you had a background in this, and so what made you decide? All right, I am going to actually get certified and teach other people how to,
Well,
or what
thank
point
you.
of life? Yeah, was
Yeah,
that?
and thank you for saying that. So, first of all, I want to say that I am not certified. However, I
Mhm.
have been a researcher throughout my adulthood.
Yes,
So, I have been a student and I have been my own scientific experiment.
yes,
And
yes.
so, not only with myself, but even through my pregnancy, and the first part of my son's life, and then also other family members that I've
Mm,
introduced to this, and I've
mhm.
coached people. So yeah, I've just been a student, and I really kind of nerd out on nutrition, and it's my thing. Like I love learning about it. I love learning about the body. I love learning about different foods and nutrients and how they impact us and how to optimize,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
because I draw the connections. And I want to say this to everybody, our bodies have their own intelligence. And so
Mm.
a lot of that is listening to your body's own intelligence. So listening to what my body is responding to, and I can tell my body lets me know when I am
Mhm.
not um, giving it what it needs to function at its most energetic or even at its most glowy, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so I watch, I observe, I test and I try and I experiment. And so I say that because there are a lot of people out here, and there are a lot of fads that come up. There are a lot of trends that come up in the nutrition world where somebody will say, oh, well, this is the way to do it. And, everybody must do
Right,
this. And this is the,
right.
listen to what your body is telling you.
Yeah,
And even, in the medical field, a lot, and not knocking the
yeah.
physicians out there, and not knocking, people who study and go into the field of medicine, but nutrition is only barely touched upon,
It's
or
barely,
now,
if still barely.
if exactly, barely touched upon. And now there is a field for culinary medicine that is starting to emerge, because
Really?
yes, and
I
especially in
don't
the
think I've heard
West.
culinary. I was about to say you're in California, so you always get privy to these alternative kind of things. I don't know if I've
Yeah,
heard formally studying culinary medicine, but yeah, go
yeah.
ahead.
And so now that is sort of starting to emerge as something that people in the mainstream medical field are starting to recognize as important. But
Mm,
I mean, some of those things are like, that's some of our wisdom that we knew from back in the day, us as indigenous folk, who
absolutely.
always knew to rely on our herbs, to rely on getting your greens and your fresh veggies and
Absolutely.
all that stuff. Like this food industry and the processed laboratory made
Mhm.
food thing is a relatively new thing in our overall existence on the planet.
Absolutely.
you
Absolutely.
know
Oh my gosh. Yes. I
so
mean, I need to do a whole podcast about that because, and I think people are beginning to intellectually get more informed on that. At the same time, I think people have a really, and all of us have a difficult, because it's such a heavy conditioning. It's
mhm,
very difficult to put that into practice on a consistent, sustainable way where you let go of the processed and you embrace more of the plants. And everybody's body is different, and as a health coach, for me, I noticed when I would go plant-based, while I would feel better, I wasn't like, weight didn't just drop off. Like hearing your story, I'm like, yeah, no, my body was like, that's nice. You feel better, but we still gonna hold on. And I'm like, what? And I started having to listen. And I noticed when I incorporated more fish into my diet, then like that level of animal protein, my body responded really well. Dairy is like, nah, we don't want a whole bunch of dairy. And it's like, okay, so I've really had to play with that. And it's given me a lot more respect for future clients and current clients that, you have to pay attention to your body, because while this will work in, there's never to me a negative, honestly, with having a mostly plant diet. But some people
mhm,
may need a bit of animal protein here or there, just kind of, but you gotta, if you're not tuned in, you're not gonna know. So all right, okay, so I want to hear about you stepping into Neema. And like you mentioned in the beginning, hearing that there was a time where that didn't really, you weren't connecting and fully embracing and stepping into that, because we're calling this finding your voice after 40. Did it take you at that point after 40 to really step into self, or had you began to really do that prior to that?
mm, wow, great question.
Mhm.
And again, it's like the seeds are there, right? The
Okay.
seeds are there. And I've always been a spiritual person. And so I've always felt that there was something, or that I was capable of great things. But my younger self had doubts, had self esteem issues, which showed up in the kinds of relationships that I was choosing.
Mhm.
And so there was growth and healing and finding of self that I needed to, or rediscovering of self, remembering. of
Remembering stuff.
self
Yeah.
that I had to do.
Yeah.
And so, really, ultimately, from that higher spiritual perspective, we're remembering who we are
Mhm.
at our
Mhm.
core.
Yep. Yep.
But life, the 3D human experience that we go through,
Mhm.
yeah, I would say a lot of it had to do with getting really clear on my what I my worth, what
Mm.
I deserved, um, and then what I wanted.
Mm.
Because sometimes we go along with things because if it's not like really extreme and if it's not like a hard no, then sometimes it's like, well, maybe I might try this out. And then, you
Mhm.
going along this path, you're like, nope, this is,
That's
mm-mm.
not
Or you
it.
start to see, yeah, exactly. You
Yeah.
see those, that's not it. But then by the time you get to that point, there's attachments, there's other things where now it's not as easy to step out of and extract yourself from situations.
Mhm.
But yeah, I would say really, hmm, after 40. And that was interestingly a time that my faith was tested.
Mm.
It was a time that um, it was really a big part of what made me who I am today. And so I'll just share with
Mm.
y'all that um, I had been working, and I didn't tell you this part about my professional experience. So I had many years been in human resources. And so I had started this job in a place that I thought was going to be really cool. It ended up not working out.
Mm.
And I also had gone into real estate. Well, the time that I went into real estate, the first go round was right when the housing market was
I was about
going
to say, was that
crazy.
the okay, recession or not? Okay, yeah. Mhm.
Yes, right before the
Okay.
the bubble burst.
Right.
And so I found myself for the first time. I didn't have a steady income.
Mm.
I was in a relationship with someone who was helping me at the time, and like I had to rely on, which was
Mm.
foreign for
Mm.
me.
Mhm.
Because I had always worked, like from the time I was old enough. Like I started tutoring when I was 14. I got a job working
Right.
at the stadium here, doing nachos in the concessions and working concession
Yeah.
stand when I was 15. So like always had a job, right?
Mm.
Always was responsible, always looking out for
Mm.
myself for the most part. And like, so here I am. And I ended up losing that job, but it actually ended up being a blessing because it was not a good fit. And
Mhm.
I remember the day before they told me that they were not continuing me with this job, I had a dream
Mhm.
about having a nervous breakdown.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
and in the dream, it was like I was asking myself, what is it like when what is that edge that a person can go
Wow.
over? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
and it was just very interesting. So then when I was released from that job, there was disbelief, but there was also relief.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
then I really started pursuing the real estate. And then as life would have it, this person who was, doing things that I had been putting up with, but it was like, okay, you're doing too much. And
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
I've had enough, and like you have to go. And it's like regardless of what my financial situation is, you have to go.
You have to go.
I'm gonna work it out regardless. I don't know how,
And this
but
is after your 40s. This is you're
this
in
was
your
right
40s.
before. This was
Okay.
just before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Um, yeah, and so this is I want to set the stage for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then yeah, ended up releasing that relationship. And so here I am. I have a mortgage. I have my son there. I ended up getting some help from my mom, to
Mm,
pay my mortgage. I went into my savings. I emptied out some retirement that I had been saving from
mhm.
another prior job, was living on credit cards.
Wow.
I
Wow.
considered strongly walking away from the property because it was upside down at this point, and it was like
Mm,
I
that's
didn't see if it was ever gonna, get the value back or be worth me staying there. And just so happens that during that time, while all this crazy stuff was happening,
mm,
I met someone who I started dating, and we
mm.
ended up getting married 4 years later. Um, and
Now
so,
that was after 40, and I think people need to hear that because I think people think,
yes,
oh, you get to a certain point of life, you're not going to meet anybody worth what have you. And for you, no, that wasn't the case at all.
yeah. So, yes.
Yeah.
And at this point, I am 40 when I met
Yeah.
him. And
Yeah.
so, yeah. And I made it through that time. I ended up getting hired for back in HR with another job, which at the time that it occurred was like a miracle for me
Mm,
because I was able to keep the home. I was able to refinance and get my
okay.
mortgage under control,
Right.
and things just shifted.
Yeah.
And I got some breathing room,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then from that
No,
point, it was just oh, go ahead.
no, no, no. Go ahead. Go ahead. You're
I was
fine.
gonna say that and it was really interesting because even though I was going through enormous stress, like to the point where I was having hives on my body,
Mm,
like, and I had
mm,
never had that before, but I was like breaking out in hives because, um, here I'm like, I have to have a place for me and my son to live. And
right. Right.
granted, if push came to shove, family would have let us stay there. But being the independent, strong-willed person that I am, I wanted to make sure that we had our own place. And
Right. Right.
that was so important to me. And then at a certain point, my dad was living with us, me and my son. And so,
Mm,
that was a whole other thing. And so
yeah.
it was really important to me, to be able to keep this home. And this was like the first home that I had bought. And
Mm,
so that whole experience, though, of when I came out the other side, it let me know that I made the right decision by
right.
not sticking in this situation that was not good for me, that was not healthy for me, that was not serving me, and trusting that I was going to be okay, even though it
Mm,
might be messy and scary in the middle, that messy
yeah.
middle that we talk about,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
just having that faith and trust in myself that I was going to figure it out, that I was going to work it out, and that God was going to see me through it.
Yeah.
And I got it, and like in the nick of time, to the point where like one day when I got that offer, I'm driving down the freeway, like things were really, really crazy. And I got the call and I was like laugh crying because it was
Yeah.
like, okay, God, I could use a miracle right about now. And then I get this call.
And there it came.
And there it came.
Listen, that don't add, I mean, we could do a whole another episode of how God and universe and source just show up when,
Hmm.
necessary. But it's the lessons, you needed the lessons. And we're always, the net is always with us. The net is
Hmm.
there to catch us, but we still need to get the lessons. And and we're running out of our time, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so many more questions. But I want to emphasize, in your story, and the abundance of your story, of so many, these different spaces you've been able to explore about yourself, and being able to have this renewal and this shift right in that 40s. And I hope that people who are younger than 40s who are listening to this, because I think a lot of times people are urgently trying to get their life right in your 30s. Like that 30s is that like, I don't have a house yet. I don't have a, partner yet. I don't have kids yet. I don't have, who am I? And it's like, yeah, you know what is those of us who've gotten past the 40 mark and even 50 mark recognize that life is got so much more in store for you
Oh
at
man,
that
does
point.
it. Like, I mean, and at this point, being in the 50 plus club, I feel
Yeah.
like that stuff is really getting good and like, oh, I'm loving this.
Yeah.
And like, I know so much more about myself. I know so much more about life. And for anybody that's listening who, like Kenya just said, has that pressure, which sometimes it's self-imposed, sometimes it's
Mhm.
outside world, but it's
Mhm.
like who you are is not what you do, and it's
Mm.
not what you have. It's who
Mm.
you be.
Yeah.
And it's,
Yeah.
the core of you. And at your core, you are divine.
Yeah.
You are a child of God,
Yeah.
and you are enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And often, thank you for that. And I really hope people really took that in, that B part, because we spend a lot of our life, and particularly if we don't recognize that entering in our 40s, that can get really frustrating. Because if we still are valuing the things, the more we go in the life, the more it doesn't add up to things. It just doesn't add up to things. And so, it's important to release that, to really allow yourself to release. I'm not saying that things don't matter, but things are not the core. They can complement or not, they can inhibit or enhance, like they're things.
Mhm.
But your assignment is to be you.
Yeah. And
And
there's nothing wrong with wanting to have
right.
nice things and wanting
Yeah.
to experience, that, like, hey, do that,
Right.
that's what you
Right.
want, but that's not everything.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
we are at our time. My goodness. Okay, so this is what I want to make sure that you do. There's two things that I want to make sure. Um, I think it's two, it might be three. One thing is, please share. I mentioned when I was talking to you about all the variety of things you do, and there was a plant-based products. I would love if you could share a little bit more about that. And how can people, what are some things that are forthcoming from you, or currently that you just consistently do as a coach, where people could get tapped in?
Awesome. Thank you for that question. So, one of the things that people can do to get tapped in is I have been hosting some vegan curious virtual cooking demos. And so,
Vegan curious. I love
yes. So, if you're an occasional vegan or you want to know what it's all about, or you're just interested in incorporating more plants and more healthy meals into your current eating regimen, you can come and hang out with me in my kitchen.
nice.
And I'm singing, I'm making delicious food, and
Oh, you're
I'm showing
singing
you
too.
how
Nice.
it can be fun to create healthy meals, and that it does not require a lot from you. And
Yeah.
so that is one of the things that you can do to spend time with me. And I also, as Kenya mentioned, have a program called 90 Days to Wellness Plant-Based Eating Program for those who want a deeper dive lifestyle, holistic lifestyle revamp and reset. And
Mm,
that's where, we go into things like your relationship with food, body image, nutrition. We go into various healing modalities and self care. And I
nice.
have guest experts and things like that. So that's my deeper dive. And then also, I have a podcast myself,
Yes.
and so people can follow me there. And also, I have a product based business with nutritional supplements where we have a shorter term 30-day program called 30 Days to Healthy Living.
Yeah.
And we use Arbonne nutritional supplements to help us to nourish our bodies while we do a gut reset. And one of the things
Mm,
that we didn't talk about, which that's a whole other
it's the
episode,
whole episode. The whole
is
episode.
gut health and how
Yeah.
much it impacts our overall health and well-being, including our moods and our immune system and our skin. And so
Yeah.
we do this 30-day reset where you're using products that help support a healthy microbiome. You're also encouraged to move, you're encouraged to journal, you're encouraged to practice mindful eating. And all of these are things that I teach in my program as well. And so you're able to get those products and get free coaching from me when you do the 30-day program. We put you into an accountability group. So you are going through it with other people, give you all kinds of recipes and resources. So you're not having to figure it out. You don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
We don't just
Right.
say good luck, but we actually hold your hand and help
Yeah.
keep you accountable. And that's a great way to start some foundational habits as well. Plus, to identify um, things that might not be serving your body, things that might be causing inflammation in your body, things that might be causing bloating or other
Mm,
digestive issues that you might not have identified. But when you isolate these things out, and then if you start to incorporate them back in, you can see, oh, okay, my body is not responding well to that. Let me eliminate that. And so we take away and then we build back up. And it's a really
awesome.
amazing, life-changing program.
Yes, no. Oh, you hear my alarms. I'm sorry. That's not that's my garbage alarm. Isn't that sad? I have to put alarms to remind myself the day that we're pre-recording is my garbage takeout day. Anyway, thank you for yes, and I'm going to include in the show notes the links so that people and your social media so that you can follow. I don't know if there's one you just want to say your social media handle out loud for people just as they're listening in live time or a website.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that would
Yes.
be awesome.
Yes. So people can follow me on my Instagram. It's at Neema_sings. That's Neema. And then my website is harmonicsoulwellness.com.
Awesome. And that'll be in the show notes as well. And please, I know these products. I too am an independent consultant with the products. I use them daily as well as with clients. So definitely if you're really wanting to search a bit more into this whole kind of plant-based clean living and going beyond just maybe having some carrots or some celery, but really like really digging a little bit more into these other types of ways to eat as well as skincare and all the things. So well, I have one more question, and this is fun. And as an artist, this is going to be hard because, it's those musicians out there. We all know this is hard. But what would you say? And this can be, period, your theme song of life, or it could be your theme song for today or this month.
Mm,
What is a song right now that just really resonates with you, or a song that has always just really been your jam or your theme song?
mm. See, there you go again.
I'm
There's that
sorry.
one thing. So I'll give you one, but I can think of like several. But
Okay.
the one that's I'm vibing with right now is It's My Time by Kelly Price.
Mhm.
I just that song just gets me going every time because it's my time to rise, it's my time to shine.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
That song
that's
lyrically is just and it's Kelly. And so
yes.
Kelly's gonna belt it to you and give it everything. So not only are the lyrics just so timely always,
Hmm.
but Kelly, because of her vocal, you know, just insanity, she just
Yes.
really, makes you believe, yes.
Yes. You're like, yeah, yeah, Kelly, yes. Yes, it's my time.
Even if
With you,
you
sis.
right, it's like you may have thought, "I'll never do this." And you hear that song, you're like, "Yes, I will. It's my time."
That's right.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we're doing a playlist. We're putting that together. By the time the ears are on this, hopefully the playlist, the Spotify playlist will be in the mix, but we're new, so we're trying to build up the list. I don't want to have a playlist of 3 songs, right? So we're trying to kind of build that up from our people. So, well, thank you so much. We are new friends, and so I'm learning more and more about you and hearing your story and hearing the twists and bends. for me was just a lot of food for my soul. And, I'm certain that it will be that for others. So, I just really appreciate you. Really.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate you.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. So we're going to go into our bonus, but that means we're going to be ending this part of the segment. So those of you who are listening on Spotify and Apple and all the goods, if you want to hear more from Neema, she's going to provide some advice. And she's also going to share some things about herself that she didn't share here that are interesting. So make sure you go over to patreon.com/finding your voice and you will get those goods. But the rest, don't join. This is it. And we hope you guys will continue to tune in, and we'll see you next week.
Peace and love.
Thanks. And now our bonus. All right. It's so easy and quick. So we only have a few moments, but I want, yes, if somebody is listening who is over 40 and may have a similar story as yours, where they feel like they have done a variety of things, but they're still having a difficult time landing in their skin or landing in their voice, and they're after this 40 part. What advice would you give to help them maybe step into themselves a bit more?
Well, I would say this. Number one, you are the highest authority for your life. One of my mentors, Allison Bird, teaches on that. And you are the highest authority for your own life. So when you let that be your overarching belief and driver, then you start to think about making decisions from that lens.
Yeah.
And thinking about too that our suffering, our trials, everything that you've been through has some of life's biggest gems and some of the biggest breakthroughs, and some of your gifts are wrapped up in that. So like for me,
I was just gonna say those gifts. Those gifts get so tucked away, and they're put in a box, and then in the back of the closet, and then some shoes on top. Like people
Oh my
really
God.
sleep on their gifts.
Yeah.
But keep going. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, like I said before, you are enough. You are you are unique. And I don't know if I can cuss on here, but I'm just saying, oh, okay. This is the pay part.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't fuck this up.
No, right.
This life. It's all lessons. It's all learning. So, there are many, many opportunities. And again, this is exploration. And so we're all on our own timeline, and your timeline is your timeline, and you are in perfect divine order.
Absolutely.
Now, do we have choice? Absolutely. Are we co-creators? Yes. We get to decide. And the biggest thing is giving yourself permission to choose to co-create the life of your heart's desire, having the courage to allow yourself to take some risks, to live fully, because it's like, I had to just get to this point where it's like, if not now, when?
Right.
Like, I don't want a regular average life. I want an extraordinary life. And you don't have extraordinary when you're dealing with average, when you're dealing with regular. And don't get me wrong, like, I'm not knocking anybody that is on that path. But if you ask most people, if they had something that they always wanted to do but didn't do it, a lot of people would say that there was this one thing, this one express thing, or this one risk they didn't take, or there's something that they regret that they didn't do. And so it's like, it's your time. You get to co-create this life with God.
Absolutely.
You get to have the life of your heart's desire. So start, really get clear on what it is that you want, whether you need a vision board, whether you need to just, freehand write and daydream and meditate on what you would like your life to look like, what you want it to feel like, because that when you allow yourself to feel what it would feel like when you're doing and having and being who you want to be, that's when it
Yeah.
gets good.
That's when you manifest. That's when you
Yes.
manifest, when you
Yes.
step into the feeling and the knowing of it,
Yeah.
and less of it's not about the logistics. It's, I mean, logistics
Hmm.
are nice, but logistics can change. Like the way how this is going to look, how this is going to come about, you don't have any idea. In fact, it's typically going to be much grander, much more interesting and compelling than
Yeah.
you could have even planned for that to be. But that
Man,
central feeling.
look, God is an exceeder of expectations.
Yes, and
And
yes, yes.
we have this, we might have this idea in our mind of something that we wanted, and God's like, oh yeah, that's cool. But this is what I'm gonna give you, and so just over and above and abundantly
Yeah,
beyond what we can imagine. And it's a
always.
beautiful thing. It's such a
It
beautiful
really is.
thing.
It
And
really
so,
is.
and I'll just recommend
That.
this briefly if I have time to. There's a book called The Power of Receiving, by
Mm,
Amanda Owen, that I
okay.
recommend for anybody that's trying to figure it out and wants to get more clear on what you want or how to co-create, because she has some really cool exercises in there,
Nice.
including some where you're doing that visualization, and everything starts
Nice.
with vision.
I love
So
that. Well, I
yeah.
wrote a note of that because that won't be in the show notes because this is bonus. But those who are watching, please make sure. Yeah. Well, this is my last quick question, and we're gonna bounce off. What is something I didn't ask? And we didn't have no time. We only had 10 minutes. But what's something that I didn't ask that you wish I would have, or what is something that you just want to share about yourself to others?
Hmm. What I want to say is that, we don't have an expiration date. As long as you have breath in your body,
Mm.
you can do what you want to do. So, like, one of my inspirations is Sharon Jones from, it was Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings.
Yes,
And what I love
yes.
about that sister is, like, she had a whole career. She raised her children and stuff. And then when she was in her 50s, she decided to go full out with pursuing her music career. And she
Mhm.
did her thing. And
Did her
like,
thing.
yeah, and so there have been times where I felt like, oh man, it's too late, but it's like the music has always been there. So like for the past several years, I've been singing in a band here locally and stuff like that. So I do
Mhm.
music, but um covers and stuff, but my own music, my own writing and singing. Um my intention is to get back to recording and to release some things. I had wanted to do it before the end of this year, but the end of this year is
It's
coming really
here.
quickly. And so
Yeah,
it might
yeah.
be something that happens in the beginning of next year, but I'm not going to like put this, pressure on myself, because creativity is there and
Oh,
it's going to come when it comes.
it comes when
And
it's and like you
yeah,
just said, the divinity of timing and the divine
yeah,
timing is gonna show itself. But I'm just excited that you're planting that seed and that you will be nurturing that seed because I
yes.
know, it, especially at this point of life, doing our gifts is it's a necessary part of our growth, but it's somebody needs it.
Mm.
Somebody needs it.
Oh,
So
yeah.
when we sleep on
Oh,
it, yeah. If we can just remember and get ourselves out of the way, like this is less about us, but this is really somebody. If think about your favorite song or think about your favorite movie or book, had that person say, "Well, I just, I don't know, I'm just not gonna," like you would
hmm,
have been deprived from that gift. And there's so many of those things that keep us inspired, and
hmm,
keep us motivated. So wow, this has been amazing. And I just
yeah.
want to thank you again for taking, time. We're recording this on a Sunday, so I appreciate you taking your Sunday to spend time with me and to talk about this stuff.
Oh, of course. I have to come and sit with you.
We talk. I've been on
Anytime.
your podcast, so I appreciate. I was like, I've got to make sure, those people who I've been on their podcast. I'm like, I got to invite them because I really value that and make sure that we support one another. So
Well, thank you.
awesome. You're welcome. You're welcome. So I'm going to get ready to end this recording. Naima, stay right there. Don't jump off of the thing yet, but I am going to end. And for the Patreon watchers, thank you all for tuning in, and make sure you are following Naima and digging into all the resources that, that she has to offer. So All righty. I'll see you guys. Don't leave yet. Name. Oh, I love the heart. Yes. I'm going to start using the heart. All right. We'll see you guys. I'm going to end the broadcast.